Yes, thank you.
Good. Okay. So my name's Alison Bromcooper. I'm Assistant Director here at Somerset Council. This morning we're hoping to provide an update to you on a number of matters. And if we just have a quick look at the agenda, we've split it into two parts. So the first part will be providing an update on phosphates. And then we will be moving on to talking about the statement of community involvement, which went out to consultation recently, and we'll be going back to the executive for adoption. Some consultation which we're planning to make around the principles of placemaking and movement, and an update on the amended local plan and our need to do an urgent site allocations review following a court order, and then there will be any other business. We will have a break between.
Yeah, no, I can't believe we're always at the end of July. But
Okay, so I'm going to pass over to colleagues now to start the update on phosphates.
Good morning all, my name's Paul Browning. I'm a principal planner here at Somerset Western Taunton. I trust everybody can hear me.
Yes,
Okay,
thanks.
Thank you very much. I'll be joined on this presentation this morning with Emmeline and also John Hammond from Area South, and also Andre in terms of an update for Area East. Next slide, please. This presentation is all around phosphates, as I've articulated already, in terms of, just to remind everybody, in terms of the broad background. Can we have the next slide, please? If you recall, the purpose of this is basically to give an update of where we are in terms of achieving nutrient neutrality while supporting economic growth and housing growth. Secondly, we're going to give our update around 3 river catchment areas, the affected catchments of the River Tone, Brew and Parrett, which all feed into the Somerset Levels and Moors. And then the last part of this update is concerning our recent fund to central government for £10 million in terms of the government's nutrient mitigation fund. Can I have the next slide, please, Emily? In terms of background, this should be familiar. We've presented this on a number of occasions to you at these updates. In summary, it all stems from August 2020, where Natural England issued their advice note to us and all the local authorities in Somerset and the affected areas of Dorset concerning the unacceptable levels of phosphates on the Somerset, Levels and Moors Ramsar sites. In a few minutes' time, I'll show you the slide that you're probably all familiar about, the geographical extent. This stems from the court judgments that new development has to be phosphate neutral, and we've explained that in the previous presentations to everybody. And the types of development that are affected, they are new residential, commercial developments, agricultural developments, and some forms of tourist developments. For a definitive list of what is caught, please look at our website. Finally, in March of 2022, Natural England issued us another letter about the unfavourable condition of the River Axe Special Area of Conservation, the SAC. That's the River Axe that flows southwards into from the Blackdown Hills into East Devon and goes southwards. That affects areas around also Chard locality, but also it is another Natural England letter on unacceptable issues around the unfavourable condition of phosphates in that locality as well. Next slide, please. As I explained, there are 3 river catchments that are affected. Just remember the broad principle that nutrient solutions have to be delivered on a catchment by catchment area basis. What does that mean? That means that if your development is in the River Tone catchment area, your solutions, your nature-based solutions, if they're being implemented, have to be within that catchment area. They could not, for example, be in the River Parrett or the Brew catchment area. Similarly, as local authorities, we have been focusing on finding mitigation solutions to actually facilitate granting of planning permissions. Next slide, please. And the next one. This map should be familiar with you. This is a result of the technical work that the local authorities did with consultants, Wessex Water, the Environment Agency, Natural England and the water boards. That redefines the affected geographical extent of the nutrient issue. There are three colours in terms of the pink colour, broad area is the River Tone catchment area, the green area is the Parrot, and likewise the donut shaped light blue area with the white bit in the middle is the Brew catchment area. The detailed red locations within that map are the Ramsar sites themselves, which are all hydrologically linked to the river catchment areas. As explained in previous presentations to you, the major areas that were in change were to effectively to the east of Bridgewater, but also in around the environments of Glastonbury. Next slide, please, Emily. And the next one, please. In terms of where we are across Somerset, first of all, we are doing technical updates of the Somerset P calculator, the budget calculator. They are, as you recall, it was originally developed and published in early 2021. It uses bespoke localized data. It has been agreed for use by Natural England and supported by Natural England. It was developed in partnership with Wessex Water, the EA, the Environment Agency, consultants and us. It uses localized data rather than the more generic national calculator that was developed subsequently by Natural England that uses national data. We are currently doing the updates and running checks on the data in terms of new updates, etc. So in the next month, probably there'll be a new updated calculator with more localized information. Moving on, we are regularly updating and having meetings with our key stakeholders. For example, we have monthly meetings with the Environment Agency and officers from Natural England, Wessex Water and others. Next slide, please. Across Somerset, we have, as officers and as members, been engaged in lobbying central government on a range of matters since August 2020. The range of issues, as summarised in this slide here, involve funding, 5-year housing land supply, also the effects on SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises. All of our lobbying letters are on our website, and also you can see the responses from ministers and officers to the issues that we've raised. There are some matters, for example, 5-year housing land supply, which we're still awaiting government advice, and we'll be still pushing for central government to provide advice on those such matters. Next slide, please. Across Somerset also, nutrient neutrality has also been in the High Court, locally in terms of Jerston Farm, Wellington. Whilst I'm not going to go into the details of the case, it is a national test case. The appellant's appeal to the High Court was dismissed. The latest judgment confirms the council's approach, which is basically is that appropriate assessment applies to reserve matters and discharge of conditions. In terms of where we are, as I said, that appeal was dismissed. Effectively, it means that there is no change to the council's approach, that reserve matters and conditions are caught by the nutrient neutrality issues. In terms of where we are, in terms of next stage, our understanding is the applicant has been given leave to apply direct to the Supreme Court, and we await a decision of that application. If not granted, the next stage will be the Court of Appeal. Next slide, please. Across Somerset also, I'm going to hand over to Emmeline to do a few slides and updates on this section.
Thanks, Paul. So yeah, also across Somerset, there's been various actions ongoing associated with the creation of phosphate credits. So as the local planning authority, there is no statutory requirement for us to intervene to address the phosphates issue. However, understanding the variety of challenges that the issue is presenting, not least on housing land supply and the effect on small and medium-sized enterprises, the former councils of Somerset resolved to take proactive action to try and find solutions to the issue. And to that end, at the moment, the council has a phosphate credit scheme scheme that is run by the council within the River Tone catchment area. And I'll come on to that in a little bit more detail. And we've also been working with third parties in terms of other phosphate credit schemes, which again we'll come on to in sort of catchment by catchment area updates in just a moment. But I guess the main message on this slide is that the River Tone P credit scheme is in operation, and Somerset is one of only a handful of councils across the country to have an operational nutrient credit scheme. And then just a reminder on this slide that when we are talking about P credits in the following slides, that equates to 1 kilogram of phosphate removed per year. So when we talk about P credits, we're not saying that's equivalent to 1 dwelling, it's equivalent to 1 kilogram of phosphates removed per year. So building on that, we thought we'd provide some sort of catchment by catchment area updates of what's been happening within each of the catchment areas that feed into the Somerset levels and moors, as Paul presented. So firstly, we have an update on the River Tone catchment area. So the River Tone catchment area, as I'm sure many of you will already be aware, is within in Somerset West, and it impacts on Taunton and Wellington, so Area West. In terms of where we within the River Tone catchment, there are approximately 110 planning applications that are held in abeyance while seeking a phosphate solution. In terms of breaking that number down, it includes 30 applications for major development, 6 applications for the discharge. Sorry, I think it might be a little bit more, but anyway, 6 applications for the discharge conditions and also for reserved matters. What that equates to in terms of dwelling numbers is approximately 3,000 dwellings that are held in abeyance, awaiting a phosphate solution. We are seeing on-site solutions coming forward by developers, and there has been a variety of solutions that have been put forward and have resulted in planning permission being able to be granted, and that includes sort of temporary fallowing land proposals, wetland proposals, woodland planting as well. So as I mentioned, there is a council-led P credit scheme in operation in the River Tone catchment. That has been so P credits have been allocated and made available through that scheme in accordance with a criteria-based system. So the former Somerset West and Taunton Phosphates Planning Subcommittee basically agreed a criteria-based system which prioritised the applications held in abeyance, and it's that priority criteria that was used to then allocate P credits out to effective planning applications. In terms of what this looked like, the first round of the River Tone P credit scheme started in December 2022. That was when the letters were issued to applications that were eligible as part of that first round. And that first round prioritised minor applications for C3 housing developments or traveller sites, and that can be implemented within 3 months of the grant of planning permission. So one of the criteria for the P credit scheme is that we should offer P credits to implementable development, which is defined as applications that, unless otherwise agreed with the council, are able to commence development within 3 months of their planning permission being granted. We've recently, in June 2023, been able to issue another round of letters to a next sort of tranche of applications that are eligible in accordance with the criteria. And essentially what the round 2 letters went out to was any remaining minor applications for minor housing developments. This is perhaps applications that weren't ready to proceed in December 2022 but are now in a position to be able to do so, and also all applications that exceed affordable housing policy with that requirement for them being implementable development. So within 3 months of the grant of planning permission, they're able to commence on site. And more information on the P credit scheme and how the credits are being generated is available within the standard appropriate assessment of the strategy. That's available on the website. That breaks down the projects that are part of the interim strategy and its entirety. It's estimated that the strategy will be able to unlock between 174 and 871 homes across the catchment. So in terms of what progress looks like to date on those 2 rounds of P credit allocation that I mentioned, so far 53 planning applications were offered Rivertone P credits as part of the first round, and of those 53 we received 26 applications for P credits. At present, 8.2 P credits have been allocated as part of that round, equating to 36 dwellings. And as we've moved to round 2, there's currently 22 applications within round 2 that have been offered P credits, and there are further applications that may come forward in round 2. And the reason that they haven't been issued letters as yet is because before we do that, in consideration of the implementable development requirement, we want to make sure that all other planning matters on those applications have been resolved, so that once the P credit letter is issued, we're able to issue planning permission as soon as possible. In terms of what we ask of applicants that are interested in acquiring P credits, essentially what they need to submit to us as part of that the scheme is their phosphate budget calculations using the Somerset phosphate budget calculator, a short P credit application form, and a shadow habitats regulations assessment, because all applications with a phosphate implication within the Somerset Levels and Moors catchment area must be accompanied by an HRA. In order to kind of expedite the process and make this easier for applicants, we have prepared a template shadow habitats regulations assessment, which is available on the website. Once the applications, SHRA and the calculations have been reviewed, all applications that are part of the P credit scheme are also subject to a Section 106 agreement, which secures the credits, and also to sort of support applicants and help the process, we have a template Section 106 agreement which sets out all the sort of terms of that agreement, and that's also available on the website. And as part of the credit scheme, essentially, once the applicant acquires the credit, it's then Somerset Council that kind of monitor and manage the projects that that's associated with. So that was the update for the Rivertone catchment, and I think I'm now handing over to Andre, who'll provide an update on the River Brew catchment area on the call.
Thank you.
Whilst we're waiting for Andre, I see you've got your hand up. Is it a question now, or can it wait till the end of this section?
No, I'm quite happy to wait till the end. It was about the tone, but I mean, I think it'll wait till the end. Quite happy to do that.
It's a fairly short update for the River Brew. Essentially, we've got a couple of private credit schemes which have been signed off, which are making credits available within the Brew catchment, which is the former Somerset East Mendip area and a bit of the North South Somerset area. The yew tree farm credits have largely been allocated. Let's say we've got a smaller number of overall applications held, but those Somerset ones are able now to access some further credits. If you go to the next slide, I think there's the main one, which is the Manor Farm Prestley, which has around 140 credits on offer, and actually there could be further phases of that if needed. And there's a smaller scheme in the South Somerset area. So essentially there are credits available for sale, and we are seeing some allocations. We've seen sites allocated, certainly from the yew tree farm stage. So, but there's a slight difference here, clearly, because these are private schemes. So we're not directly in control of either the pricing or the reservation and allocation of those credits. And at the moment, those are the only schemes that we have in the Brew catchment. In addition to that, there are other applications where we're considering bespoke schemes, and I think, as with other areas, there are also solutions on upgrading PTPs, etc., which is happening in other parts of Somerset. I think that's all I got to update. Back to, is it John going to cover the next bit?
Yep, thanks, Andre. So yeah, the next update is for the River Parrett catchment. I don't know if John Hammond's on the
Yes.
call. Yeah,
Yeah.
brilliant.
Yeah.
Thanks, John.
So we've got the Parrett and also the River Axe catchments in Area South. On the Parrett, obviously, there's been more work done to date, so our numbers are somewhat larger because we've got the bulk of the district, excepting Wincanton, Templecombe and Henstridge, covered by the Parrett. We took the first of our applications that had previously been to committee and had then been held up by phosphate delays back to committee on Tuesday. Relatively small scheme, about 35 houses, but it went through committee fairly quickly. The reason they've got to go back is because the determinations in 2019, 2020 didn't include phosphate mitigation, and some of the reports that support those schemes are now somewhat out of date. We're working with a number of applicants who had got resolutions prior to phosphates coming in to get those applications back to committee as soon as possible, so that we can make some progress on those developments. And I think the bulk of those larger applicants are looking at sourcing phosphate solutions through emerging credit markets or land holdings they've already got. So that's, I think, covers that slide. Yeah, we've through the committee process, we've got about 320 schemes awaiting Section 106s with phosphate solutions, and these comprise a mix of package treatment plants, the managed package treatment plant, the Albion or Severn Trent option, retrofitting water efficiency measures. This generally works with housing associations, and we're looking at rolling out a program with ABRI so that they can partner up on larger sites and make use of their existing housing stock, and that's something that they're trying to progress through the Natural England Discretionary Advice Service. The other scheme that's coming forward quite a lot, which isn't on this slide, I'm not sure if it's going to be on the next slide, is the replacement of septic tanks, which has become quite a I say common, a more frequently used solution in Area South. Initially, they were coming about with individual applicants sourcing septic tanks and offering to undertake the upgrade of those to release their own site. We've now been working with our solicitors on some template agreements or undertakings that can allow these to be produced through a sort of a brokered mechanism, so that people with septic tanks can be matched up with developers. And there are, I think, early promotional exercises from septic tank engineers about how that solution may come forward. So we are beginning to see a number of sort of medium to large schemes that are able to get to committee and do have phosphate solutions. And as I said, the sort of the retrofitting of the septic tank upgrades do seem to be very space efficient in terms of, of sort of land take. I'm not sure if the next slide is a Parrett catchment slide or not. Entrade's just completed its round one of market sales. They've been looking to effectively match up land use change providers with developers. They did cap their first program at 5 kilos, which I know was frustrating to a number of larger developers, but it has allowed them to offer an opportunity to small scale providers. They have worked very closely with Natural England and the Environment Agency in terms of defining their program, but it is a complex project because of the range of parties that they're bringing forward. I hope that within the next 2 to 3 weeks we'll have further information on the number of schemes that have actually been released by an Entrade credit. Thank you. I think this is now back to probably Kate and Paul.
Thank you, John. It's actually me, Paul Browning. Right. Moving on, the last part of our update to everybody is to give you an update on where we are on our recent bid for further money from central government in terms of the government's nutrient mitigation fund. Next slide, please. At the end of May of this year, Somerset Council, in partnership with a number of organisations such as Dorset Council, the Farming Advisory Service, Advisory Group, sorry, FWAG, Plymouth University, and also Salinity Solutions, we submitted a bid for approximately £10.5 million to the government's nutrient mitigation fund. Next slide, please. What does that cover? In essence, we are looking to do a number of things in terms of our bid. The most important one is the one that's highlighted there, is a modular treatment unit co-located at wastewater treatment works to reduce the level of phosphates prior to 2030. In essence, what we're looking at is using new energy efficient water processing technology developed by Salinity Solutions. To those ends, we've done a pre-pilot to demonstrate the efficacy of the overall approach. And in essence, what it's showing is that we can meet the government's target of going to 0.25 milligrams and beyond already using their technology. What we need to understand is moving. Have I lost the? Apologies. Can everybody hear me? We had a notice come up saying I lost connections. Thank you very much. I will come back to it now. I'll just go recap on that. We're looking at new energy efficient measures for processing water developed by Salinity Solutions. That has the potential to assist on nutrient neutrality in the affected areas. To those ends, we have done a pre-trial which has been funded by Wessex Water and Salinity Solutions. That pre-trial has occurred this week and last week, and to those ends, the results are showing very favourable. In fact, they're extremely good. It shows that their technology can get down to 0.25 milligrams per litre and beyond. We've been trialling this work at Fivehead, but in terms of other things, just come back to the key things in terms of on this slide here. We're also looking at measures to do retrofitting water efficiency measures at septic tanks and also registered providers, as alluded to by John Hammond in his earlier presentation. We're also looking to upgrade a programme of measures to update septic tanks in rural areas especially, and also upgrade packaged treatment plants. We're also working with the advisor group, Farming and Wildlife Advisory Group, FWAG, in terms of nature-based solutions. And as I said here, a research pilot as well led by University of Plymouth to verify the effectiveness of various measures. The results will help to inform nutrient neutrality in the catchment areas. Next slide, please. As I said, decision is being awaited for our bid. At this moment, we do not know what the timescales are. Similarly, in terms of our bid, we've informed all the MPs in the locality in terms of across Somerset, and also our new member for Parliament for Frome and Somerset and Somerton. Next slide, please. In terms of the initial pilot trial, as I said, is being funded by Salinity Solutions and Wessex Water. They're using their new technology, which is a more energy efficient method of reverse osmosis. Effectively, we've seen how it runs off a 13-amp plug. The trial is basically, as I said, to demonstrate the efficacy of the units and the actual number of mitigation credits that can be generated. There's also other benefits as well in terms of showing that this technology works. Next slide, please. In a bit more detail, the current trial has been taking effluent out of the sampling chamber and putting it through their modular system to remove brine. That effectively they're monitoring the levels of phosphates pre-treatment and after treatment. In terms of site visits, as I said, we've had the Right Honourable Rebecca Powell at the site to see the new technology, also various officials from DEFRA and also the Environment Agency. Next slide, please. In terms of where we are, I think it's extremely good that Salinity Solutions can go to TAL and beyond. As we know, the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill requires phosphates, and thus focusing on phosphates to actually deliver at 0.25 milligrams per litre. This technology can go that. What we need to do is trial it, and we're asking central government for the money to do that. And as I said, we're waiting for the bid to come forward. In terms of our final thoughts, I think for the foreseeable future, there's a need for a coordinated and appropriately resourced approach to phosphates on the Somerset levels and moors on a catchment area base, so that planned housing development is compliant with the habitats regs assessment regulations. Similarly, nutrient neutrality, and I keep on emphasising this at a number of meetings I come to, is not about making the situation any worse. It's, as it says on the can, it's nutrient neutral. We acknowledge that the development industry are only playing or have a small proportion of the overall effect on the levels and moors, but this is where we are in terms of natural links and advice notes. We need to ensure that nutrient neutral development occurs. In terms of moving on, lastly, Somerset Council, the new council, will need to consider how it wants to progress its programmes and schemes, which would reverse the decline of the ecological status of the Somerset levels moors. That's all activity that goes really beyond land use planning and land use planning that we've been talking to you today about in terms of planning applications, but also the local plan as well. Next slide, please. I think that is where I hand back to Alison. I know in the chat there are a significant number of questions that people have asked with our presentation. So we've now got approximately about 15 minutes to answer those. Alison.
Okay, so I can see one hand up, and I know that Will had previously had his hand up. So Will, do you want to go first?
Yeah, this is in relation to the tone. I had a call last night from a worried resident he'd just acquired a carbon credit, and seemed very surprised that he was expected to start within 3 months. And he said, well, I can't do that. It's been delayed for a couple of years and I can't just suddenly get it up and going. So I do wonder, well, I just wanted to know what information is given to agents and applicants about their responsibilities once they acquire a carbon credit, because the 3-month requirement obviously came as news to this guy, and he said, well, I've got to get an archaeological dig done and things like that, and I can't organise it. So this is something I'm going to have to come back to the planning department about anyway, but I just wanted to make sure that in a way the council was doing its due diligence on the ability of applicants to actually proceed in accordance with the rules that we've laid down.
Okay, so I'm going to pass over to Emmeline in a minute, but essentially the reason for the 3-month limit is because we want to make sure that development comes forward. The whole point is we don't want people holding on to credits.
Yes, I understand that, and I did explain this to him, but it obviously came as news.
There is some flexibility. I will pass it over to Emmeline because I'm pretty certain the letters that go out before they apply for the credits tell them about the requirements.
Yeah, thank you, Alison. Yeah, that's correct. So when the letters are initially issued, so essentially like an offer letter for P credits, that stipulates all of the requirements associated with the scheme, including the 3-month commencement period. In addition, we do attach the Section 106 template to that letter, and again, the 3 months requirement is within the Section 106. But as Alison mentioned, that is unless otherwise agreed. There is that option there. If an applicant can demonstrate to us that they need more time to implement, we can have that discussion with them. But in terms of the requirement, it is communicated at the time that the offer letter is made, and we do advise applicants to read that carefully and kind of agree with to themselves that they are able to fulfill those requirements before they make their application.
Yeah, and who's best to follow this up with? Is it the planning officer concerned or Emmeline or someone?
I would suggest you follow it up with Emmeline.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I would also say that when we agreed the scheme and the criteria for the way in which the credits were going to be offered, that went to the former Somerset West and Taunton Planning Committee, and it did set out in that report that there would be.
I remember. I was on the committee, and I had explained this to the applicant, but there's obviously been some sort of miscommunication or misunderstanding. I'll follow it up with Emmeline, but anyway, thank you very much.
You're welcome. So I can see Ian Firth's got his hand up. Ian, do you want to ask your question? You're on mute.
try that. Sorry, apologies. There are too many screens open. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so many questions. Sorry, I'll limit it to one for a moment. Regarding the Tone catchment area, you said on the slides that you've got 110 applications in abeyance with 3,000 dwellings shortfall. The numbers you said that the credit scheme can unlock is between 174 and 871, which is quite a significant discrepancy between the two options. But can you tell me where the current housing land supply is in the former Somerset West and Taunton area, please?
The 5-year housing land supply is at 5.13 years, and that information is available in a report that went to the Strategic Planning Committee last week.
I saw that, but how can that be possible when it's gone up significantly in the last 12 months, and yet you've still got a 3,000 house shortfall on current applications in held up by phosphate?
Those are two different things, aren't they? I think it's probably better to have this conversation offline, because the current information and the information we've provided for a recent appeal demonstrated that we did have a 5.13 5-year housing land supply in the former Taunton Dean area.
Okay.
In terms of the range, Ian, just to pick up on that point, the reason that that is quite a big range is the estimates. They're obviously estimates depending on the projects, but it's to do with the wastewater treatment works that the kind of future dwellings feed into, and they're obviously at very different efficiencies, and that affects the amount of dwellings that a credit would unlock. So that's why there is such a big range, because obviously we haven't worked out exactly where those dwellings would sort of come forward and who would actually take up the credits and where their development's located and what wastewater treatment works it feeds into. So that's why there's a range presented.
And it's also worth kind of pointing out that the credit scheme is very much focused on smaller developments. The idea was to help the smaller SMEs unlock development that was held in the system. We are seeing a number of other schemes coming forward for the larger projects, where there is a bit more flexibility for them to develop their own solutions either on or off site. So this credit scheme in the Tone area is very much for the smaller scale developments. Okay,
thank you. If I may, the other question I've got, which is probably not something you guys can answer immediately, but can you explain how water efficiency improvements reduces phosphate output from properties?
In summary, water itself has a phosphate load. Therefore, if you reduce the amount of water you're using, you're reducing the phosphate load.
And that position has been accepted by Natural England, and that's the reason why we now have a standard efficiency condition to ensure it's 110 litres per person per day in any new developments. Okay.
Right. Okay. Fine. Thank you.
So Matthew Halstead.
Yeah. Hi there. Thank you. It's just in relation to South Somerset. Can we just get an indication of what the level of available credits is compared to the level of demand for credit in the South Somerset area?
John, if you're still online, are you able to pick this one up?
Yeah, there are currently N-Trade have run their round, and that's a sort of a private arrangement. So if you bid, you would have probably got more information from N-Trade, and I'm not able to share that side. There are two proposals going through. They've been through the Habitat Reg assessment effectively and Natural England sign-off, which will deliver about 160 kilos of credit on a similar basis to the land use change project that's forming part of the what was the Somerset West interim project. So again, the range of properties that will be unlocked is difficult to define because they are third-party markets, and if they're delivering or unlocking solutions in our larger communities, you're getting circa 10 dwellings to a kilo. We could have 1,600. If they're unlocking them in unpermitted areas, then again you're at the lower end of a similar range that Somerset West's sort of model identified.
That's great, thank you.
Okay, Adam Robbins.
Hello there. I have 1,001 questions, but I shall try and keep it to what I think is probably the most important, and it does come back to the shadow HRAs. When dealing with mitigation, you're supposed to complete a section which talks about the scientific validity and certainty of the mitigation proposed. Now, if we're dealing with somebody like the BNP partnership, they are fantastic at giving their information. If we're dealing with somebody like Entrade, they are fantastically shoddy at giving that information, to the point where we could only really write a report that says, don't know, Natural England said it was okay, but other than that, can't scientifically give you any information, which is a pretty poor habitat regs appraisal. Is there going to be any movement to actually provide evidence with regards to the scientific validity of mitigation provided by people like Entrade? And I have the same thing for the Somerset phosphate scheme. Sorry, not the Somerset one, the Somerset Western Taunton one. I've asked for information on that, and it's been approved by Natural England is the response I get, which is not a scientific response or something suitable for a habitat regs assessment.
Yeah, I guess Adam, on the Somerset West scheme, in terms of, I guess, the basis of that, we do have, when we were kind of, I guess, putting together the scheme and understanding the requirements, we did speak to Natural England about what would be required, and we did prepare the standard appropriate assessment, which is available on the website. That was sort of agreed with Natural England that would be the overarching that kind of goes into the basis of the scheme, and a bit more about the projects that are underpinning that. And then essentially the SHRA would kind of sit underneath that for individual projects, so a planning application, and then that would be able to be submitted to Natural England as part, but they knew that the underpinning of that scheme was the standard appropriate assessment of the overall scheme. So that's the approach we took in agreement with Natural England, and that's meant essentially what we were hoping to do through that is basically streamline the credit scheme so that the shadow HRA for the project always speaks to the standard appropriate assessment, which Natural England are already aware of and have signed off. So that was the basis for that scheme.
Do you want to add to that?
Yeah. Also, Robin, in our response to you, I recall that we also referred to the agreement we've got with a landowner in terms of their following agreement, in terms of their proposals, in terms of what they create credits for, was also signed off by Natural England at the detailed level. In terms of Entrade, I think I would have to pass you back to John Hammond, who's had more engagement with Entrade. John, you want to add anything?
Not particularly. I mean, we are reliant upon other bodies with more involvement in testing the evidence rather than the planning authorities. So again, I think if you have an issue with how Natural England are dealing with some of this, it might be worth having a discussion with Natural England about your concerns and the advice that they're giving to us, because they are the body that we are all required to go through to test the standards that are applied.
It's not an issue with yourselves. I don't expect you to. I mean, you're experts in planning, not experts in scientific disciplines. That's why you bring other people in. My thing is, under the habitat regulation assessments, you need to provide a scientific proof, and there are some that are good at it, and there are some that are not. What I'm asking is, can we have some confirmation of what is overall acceptable? Can we simply just state it's a nutrient credit under an approved system, or do we have to follow the actual letter of the regulation? So basically where I'm going with this is, could the council issue something to state, if you buy this or these credits from this scheme, you do not need to put any scientific detail into the habitat regulations assessment?
I think that's why we've got a standard template appropriate assessment, in order to facilitate the process if you're applying under the Somerset West tone credit scheme.
Yeah, that's right. So we've had shadow HRAs. Obviously, we've issued those now to Natural England that are underpinned by the credit scheme, that are using credits, and essentially the mitigation acquisition of a P credit from Somerset West River Tone P credit scheme, and Natural England have accepted that as the SHRA for that development.
Okay,
Okay,
I'm going
thank
to
you.
move on. Russell.
Hello. Yeah, it was something I've put it into the chat, but something we raised with some of the officers individually to have a word with the team was more about the process. We were wondering if the possibility could be arranged that you could actually submit a shadow HRA at the pre-application stage, because the client has to pay for one anyway. If it's then accepted, you've de-risked the project, but it also means when you submit your planning application, in theory, it could be going straight off to the legal team just to agree a section 106, and therefore decisions could go back to being dealt with in 8 weeks. And that makes management of projects a lot easier from us. It saves Mr. Gove giving you guys grief for not determining in 8 weeks. But I think that it has to be signed off at some point. And my question is, could it be an option for people to choose to do their SHRA prior to the main application and do it as a pre-app and have it consulted at that stage and de-risk the project?
I can't see any problem with that. We will certainly take that away and look at how we can facilitate that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, but I think I saw one more hand up. David Driscoll.
Yeah, hello everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. I put a couple of questions on the chat. One was over Wells Waste Water Treatment Works. Post AMP7 figure is missing. Hopefully that's going to be updated in the Somerset calculator update. And secondly, I put a question on the chat. We're behind the U3 farm credit scheme. We have a credit scheme for the Parrot catchment coming on stream that we're hoping very soon. Can we publish contact details to the phosphate section of the Somerset Council website, please? Because we'd like to see, we'd like to take down notice of interest really on our scheme, so we can start sort of talking to people.
Okay, I'm going to ask Paul first, and then maybe Andre, if you're still online, you might want to add something.
Yes, with regard to the updates of the calculator, yes, we are aware of the issue around Wales in terms of the published rate, in terms of the permit. There are a few other locations where they are being taken into account in updating the calculator. Yes, the calculator is being updated by Royal Haskellning. Other changes, picking up a few other questions in the chat. We're going to be looking at more localized rain data, SUDS. Occupancy rates are going to be changing from this default 2.4 to a slightly lower figure. Similarly, we're going to be moving more to bespoke data related to the permit limits, and also where you have unpermitted limits, making sure that there is a sufficient buffer. That does affect a couple outliers within the very rural localities where you will have a slightly raised limit other than the default position we currently got at. In terms of your specifics on the planning application, I'll hand over to Andre.
I think that question was really about making available information on a website. Again, others can answer this as well, but I think we're certainly looking to improve the information on phosphates on the Somerset website. And I know that one of the things we're looking at is to be able to provide more information in a clearer way on the solutions that are available in each district. So yeah, I think in principle we want to make the contact details available so that it's part of a more comprehensive package and some more streamlined package of information on phosphates.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Andre.
Thanks, Andre. We will take that away and try and see what we can do. I don't know if there are any questions in the chat that we need to pick up that haven't been raised by the speakers that we've heard. Paul, is there anything you want to add to those?
I can see a couple more hands have gone up, but I am conscious of time and the rest of the agenda, Alison.
Yeah, so I'm going to suggest that we post comments in the chat to the questions that have been asked, insofar as they haven't been raised personally, because we're going to take a very short break and then come back and deal with the other items on the agenda. Thank you.
£11.55. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
To start.
Okay, if we could resume part two, and Andy Redding's going to give us an update on where we are with the statement of community involvement and the consultation responses, and the timeline for getting a report back to executive for adoption. Andy, have you got your slides? Or yeah.
Morning, everyone. Hopefully that screen share worked in terms of the slides. Do shout out if you can't see them. Yeah, this section we just want to give a quick update on where we are with statement of community involvement. Is one of those sort of key documents we need to get in place before progressing in earnest on the Somerset wide local plan. So it's just to give an update on where we are. Thank you for those who've engaged in the consultation process earlier this year. So most of you are going to know this as planning agents, but just in terms of refresher for those who don't. So what is statement of community involvement? So obviously planning, whether it's plan making or planning decisions, have to take into account lots of material considerations. And so the purpose of a statement of community involvement, or SCI for short, is to set out how the local authority will engage and consult communities and stakeholders on planning matters. So that relates to both the plan making side in terms of the documents which someone shared their screen. So everyone else getting a different screen. Will I try and reshare my slides? That back up and running?
I can see them, Andy.
Excellent, thank you. So that both relates both to the plan making aspects of the work we do as local authority in terms of preparing the new local plan, right from evidence-based stage gathering up to considering options and publishing a draft plan. Also how we support parish councils or neighbourhood forums preparing neighbourhood plans, so how we can provide them with data, how we can support them through the different regulation stages in terms of getting a neighbourhood plan made. And of course, in terms of how we publicise and take into account comments on plan applications. I mean, the reason we need one is obviously we've got 5 disparate SCIs in the sense that the former authority areas have their own separate ones, all prepared at different timescales. So we need to prepare a new single statement of community involvement. That, of course, has the benefit not just of bringing us, the document fundamentally up to date in terms of latest processes, but means that we're being consistent across the whole unitary authority area in terms of how we're undertaking planning and engaging on planning. So in terms of the consultation undertaken, so after exec in January, where the draft was approved, we had a 6-week public consultation up until 16th of March, so just before vesting day. We also had a number of other events. I think we had an agents forum then as well. We took the document to the various planning and regulation committees of the former districts as well, and the county, to get feedback from members sitting on those committees at that time. Given the experience of planning, we want to make sure that was captured. In terms of responses, on the surveys, we had 164 responses. So that included quite a good balance between residents, business responses, some feedback from agents, and parish and town councils. I mean, in terms of response numbers, I think I was actually reasonably happy with that response rate. The statement of community involvement is quite a difficult document to engage people on. It's quite process based. It's not, for want of a better word, as exciting as a local plan in terms of asking people to comment on development options, for example. So it's enough to get some useful feedback and certainly improve the document. Just to give you a sort of summary of some of the key points raised, which we're going to try and address in the document. So by far one of the biggest points raised was that, which probably was to do with the timing of it, along with the fact we were consulting on the Somerset Constitution at the time, was that it should include planning committee arrangements in terms of processes for referral, delegation, and public speaking time. We didn't at the time because we didn't have those documents adopted for the new council. And I think what we can do going forward is make sure that we're signposting to the Constitution, because the planning committee as part of the Constitution was something which was discussed as being kept under review as the unitary progresses. So we'll signpost to it in terms of where details of that can be found, so people know and are signposted to the relevant bit to understand planning committee arrangements. some concerns from town parish councils about the weight given to comments on plan applications. I mean, and given local knowledge of their area, I think. I mean, the document does sort of flag the importance of parish councils. They're obviously a statutory consultee on plan applications. So, the document does do that. I think the key thing we can certainly make it clear around the important role of parish councils in the document. I think the key thing in terms of weight is obviously to do with making sure that whoever responding is that it should relate to planning considerations. And maybe we emphasise that point about it needing to relate to commenting on applications in the context of the local plan or other planning considerations to make sure they're given weight in decision making. One point was raised about the fact there's no mention of planning enforcement in it. I think in terms of completeness, it's probably worth us mentioning that in the document. So I think we'll add a section. What we can do now, because similarly at the same time the planning enforcement policy was being prepared for the new council, we can similarly signpost to that now adopted planning enforcement policy, which we have on our website. So that means that again, people are signposted to the appropriate areas. One thing was raised around the need to make sure we're clear on, but when people can comment on applications, they have the ability to, if they can't use planning online in terms of the website, but they aren't unable to engage in the process. So there's the ability for them to either email comments in or in fact write in to make sure that we're not excluding hard to reach groups or people who might not have the accessibility requirements to comment via the website. One thing which did come out, particularly in terms of rural development, was stronger emphasis on encouraging the application engagement. This, I think we can certainly add some more information in the SRMS. I mean, it is something which is reflected fundamentally in most of the adopted local plans of the area in terms of the expectation, particularly things like rural exception sites for significant levels of genuine pre-application engagement on proposals and with the local community. So that's certainly something which we can look at in terms of the final drafting of the document. There's various comments around the general consultation bodies. So obviously the specific consultation bodies which we consult on plan making are set out in the regs. There's then a lot of flexibility over who the general consultation bodies are, which is basically how you engage with everyone else. And so there are examples. There's numerous comments on that list. It's difficult because it's not meant to be an exhaustive list in the SCI anyway, so it's how we approach this. But for example, people mentioned that there was no representation for horse riders in terms of the transport and access section, given it's a rural area. So it would have to think about that section, because there's always going to be groups which aren't included on that because it's not meant to be an exhaustive list, and it's meant to just give an example of the sorts of groups who will be consulting. And then in terms of the next one, so that the document should be clearer regarding signing up to planning policy consultations. There's an issue with this because, of course, it's something which we're working on at the moment. But in terms of a single area where you sign on to be kept informed about local plan development, that is obviously a key task for the new Somerset local plan. So the draft document was specifically vague on that because we didn't have a link to direct people to. But that is in train in terms of work ongoing with that. And if you're on the existing, if you're either here or on the existing district consultation databases, you'll be receiving a notification about signing up to a new database if you want to make sure that you're kept informed about preparation of a local plan. So that is something which will happen, and we'll make sure the document's consistent about signposting people to that section of the website. Another point is around whether we should include details of methods of engagement. So it's similar to the strengthening of pre-app engagement with local communities, about whether we could include information about best practice and methods. I think we can include some information on that in terms of making the point that the nature of the pre-app engagement will depend on the scheme and the community. In some cases, web-based online surveys might be a useful approach. In other instances, local drop-in or local drop-in events, evening events, are a useful way of engaging with people if you're dealing with a particular rural area, for example. So we can certainly give some sort of best practice methods to help give that steer, I suppose, to developers on different methods you can use for pre-application engagement. Various comments around the publicising of applications. I mean, a lot of this was in relation to wanting to be more levels of publication in terms of neighbour notification and site notices. I think the key thing is we'll be making sure we reflect what the legislation requires in terms of both site notices and neighbourhood notifications, and making sure that we are appropriately publicising, using the right publicising techniques depending on what the application is. I mean, some of those comments were raising the point about wanting us to notify and publicise on non-material amendments, but which by their nature are non-material amendments which we don't consult on. They're not an item we consult on as a matter of course. That one point which was made was around given their significance in the district, whether we should make reference to the local development order regime. I think we can include a small section on that. We do mention the processes, which is of course is governed outside the local authority area for development consent orders for nationally significant infrastructure projects. So, local development orders, we can include that as a point of reference in terms of another planning regime which is used and has been used by the former districts. So just in terms of next steps, so currently making amendments to the document based on the feedback. The intention is to take the final document through scrutiny and then to executive in October 2023. So that's the 4th of October, I believe, when executive is, for a decision to adopt it. And when that's happened, it will then essentially replace all the former district and county SCIs and essentially form a basis for consultation engagement going forward. That was everything on my slides. Happy to take any questions on it.
Okay, so are there any questions to Andy on the statement of community involvement, or can we move on to the next item? Can't see any hands or any questions in the chat, so I'm going to take that as a sign to move on. If there are questions, we can pick them up at the end. So I'm going to hand over now to Graham Thompson, who's going to talk a little bit about transport and planning policy movement principles, which went to executive and are due to go out to consultation.
Thanks, Alison. Just wait for the slides to come up. Hopefully they're on their way. Are they up for everybody? Yeah. Great, thank you. Yeah, so my name's Graham Thompson. I'm one of the principal planning policy officers in the Area West team. As Alison's just teed up, just want to kind of take you through a piece of work that's evolved and emerged over the last few months, and the forthcoming consultation around that. Go on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So this is the result of a really positive piece of work that we've been undertaking since unitarisation between ourselves in planning and colleagues across highways and transport. The intention being to improve the coordination and the consistency of our approach between the different services, and focus ourselves around a positive modern vision and a series of guiding principles which align us with national policy, our own local policies, and the general direction of travel that planning and highways and transport development is heading in. As Alison's just referred to, this went to a meeting of the executive earlier this month, where they endorsed and adopted a series of guiding principles which are there to inform the local transport plan, local plan, overall approach to transport planning, development management, and development of policies and plans. So these are a series of guiding principles that will inform our approach to considering planning applications from now. Fundamentally, it establishes a vision-led approach. So that's focusing on holistic outcomes and local priorities, and is focused around high-quality design to create better places, reducing carbon emissions, and move away from the traditional predict and provide to a decide and provide or vision and validate approach on transport assessments, focusing predominantly on active and sustainable modes, and making sure that those link to the places and the activities that people need to go to. And it, whilst reflecting rural needs and challenges and opportunities in the more rural parts of the county. So in addition to those guiding principles, Executive approved consultation on a set of placemaking principles for movement. And these are there to help define what we mean when we say we want a vision-led approach to movement and placemaking in Somerset. It's intended that they'll become a material consideration in due course, and that is following consultation, which we hope to launch sort of mid to late August, and run through to the first week of October. We'll be publishing details of that in due course. What I wanted to do today is just kind of take you through the basics of it so that you've got a bit of a heads up ahead of that consultation launching. Thank you. So just a bit of policy context here. Obviously, traditionally, a more capacity-based approach to highways and transport issues, and a particular focus on demonstrating that applications avoid severe residual cumulative impact on the road network has been taken. But this obviously has led to more suboptimal, is probably the best way to put it, outcomes, but it's fundamentally failed to deliver on modal shift and improved placemaking in our new developments that we've seen come forwards. What we know is that policy has evolved, and the focus has really shifted to healthy and safe communities, prioritising pedestrians and cyclists, recognising that movement patterns are integral to creating well-designed places which put people first. And the National Design Guide is central to that, as well as obviously previous iterations of Manual for Streets, etc. Publication of Local Transport Note 120, LTN 120, and establishment of Active Travel England as a statutory consultee, as well as the high-level national targets, some of which are on the screen there. They help to further kind of sharpen the focus alongside the legally binding target of net zero by 2050. Locally, we've got a range of policies already in place that cover high quality development, sustainable location, reducing the need to travel, sustainable transport, the infrastructure itself, and integration of communities, both new and existing. And again, that's supplemented by a consideration of the fact that the climate emergency is a material consideration through planning. We've got a series of design guidances locally, and we've got the newly set up quality review panel, and all of these set a clear expectation for better outcomes for placemaking and the key role that movement plays as part of that. And we've got a number of local cycling and walking infrastructure plans now across the patch, and the Connecting Our Garden Communities plan in particular for Taunton. Through those, we set a clear expectation of this new vision-led approach. So, thank you. So this slide just summarises the guiding principles that were approved by Executive recently. I've got a link to the paper that went to Executive at the end of the slides, which we can share. So I won't go through all of these in significant detail now, but I think the key things to kind of pick up on there are reducing carbon emissions is there as a key priority, as well as this idea of a holistic approach that doesn't think just about transport in isolation. It thinks about the linkages and how that you can create better places with a range of benefits, and this vision-led approach. Carry on. So I'll just go through the placemaking movement principles in a bit more detail now. So the key kind of point that all of these hang off of is this vision statement. So, and that is, streets and spaces will be designed to be attractive, pleasant and inclusive places that accommodate all users and feel safe for use by all walking and wheeling users. They should prioritise active travel and public transport, maximising connectivity and permeability not only within the site itself, but also providing for wider connectivity. Crossings and junctions should always prioritise pedestrians in residential areas. Streets and spaces should also be designed to reflect a hierarchy where movement is related to land use and character. And that's backed up by a series of 12 principles. Again, I'm not going to go through and read all of these in full detail. You'll have the slides, and the consultation will go into these further. But to summarise, they focus on the following. So reducing the need to travel via private car, and making sure that the places that people need to go to, so the key facilities and services, are linked to, with permeability and connectivity, the key drivers there. In our towns and more urban areas, we'll look to reduce parking provision, but that needs to be aligned with a series of both hard and soft travel plan measures. It's not just a case of reducing parking and assuming that that will do the trick. And we will look for low car ownership and an ambitious level of modal shift as part of this, with multimodal travel measures. Where parking is included, we'll look for that to be designed in an unobtrusive way, and we will encourage an approach that enables the phasing out of parking over time. Secure cycle parking and infrastructure is key to this as well, and we've got a series of design guides that help explain what we mean by that. In terms of the wider highways and street environment, we want to encourage an attractive and high quality environment to come forwards, and that does mean trees in the highway. It means considering the green spaces associated with that environment as well, avoiding the large expanses of asphalt, and thinking about opportunities to kind of build in biodiversity net gain, wider green infrastructure, management of water, etc. We want to design for speeds that are less than 20 miles per hour, but that shouldn't just be reliant upon signage and legislation. It needs to be designed as a natural approach, so speeds are automatically naturally reduced, and that should in turn give priority to pedestrians and cyclists. I mentioned generally kind of connections to the places that people need to go, but access to schools is a key priority area, enabling people to access schools without reliance upon private cars and maximise their active travel opportunities in that regard. The palette of materials needs to be simple and respond to the local context, and not just a case of blacktop in all situations. We want to minimise the street clutter, so there is obviously a need for signage, for lighting and things like that, but we want to minimise the clutter, try and maximise the way that things can be used collectively together, and keep pavements, footways free of obstruction. We want lighting and utilities generally to be considered early in the design stage, so that it isn't delivered as an afterthought that then undermines other aspects of creating these places and well-designed streets and places, like I say. Leaving strips of land space left over after planning, as is generally kind of referred, is something we want to avoid, and we want to make sure that all pieces of land are allocated, whether that's to public or to private ownership. Consideration needs to be given to waste storage facilities, and we've got obviously guidance already in place on that, and that is key to making sure that these things work. In our more rural areas, we want to make sure that there is safe connectivity within and between communities. Primarily, these principles are obviously for new development, and a significant amount of that happens in our more urban areas. But there is rural development, and thinking about those connections is key as well. And finally, just ensuring that early engagement is put in across the full level of planning and delivery process. So that's thinking through some of the more detailed aspects for adoption of highway and things like that from the start, so that we don't end up with situations as has happened and continues to happen, where the strategic kind of view and design of our places cannot be fully delivered as originally intended. So it's trying to front load some of those conversations from an early stage. So that's the principles, a rapid run through there. Happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, like I said, the intention is that this consultation launches hopefully mid to late August, and there'll be plenty of opportunities to kind of get in touch as part of that.
Thank you very much, Graham. I can't see any questions in the chat. Are there any questions for anybody? Otherwise, we'll move on to the final presentation, which is Andre giving you an update on the work that we need to do on site allocations for the Mendip area, former Mendip area, Area East. Andre.
Morning, I hope you can see the slides. Should be looking at a map of the former Mendip district. I'm just going to talk briefly about a call for sites we're undertaking in connection with changes to one of the adopted plan for this area. So if I refer to Mendip district, I'm well aware it doesn't exist anymore, but it is relevant for this plan, or I might use the word Somerset East. Just some background, you may have received a notification from us that we've got some further work to do on the Mendip Local Plan Part 2. And this all comes out of a judicial review after the plan was adopted, and some part of that plan considered allocating more sites under direction of the inspector at the time to look in the northeast of the district. The judicial review effectively said that the interpretation of the plan, which said we should look exclusively in that area, was legally flawed, and the sites in that area were struck out of the plan. And the current adopted plan, you'll actually see the policies are there, but they're literally struck out and are not used for making planning decisions. Now, the former Mendip Council is actually under a court order to go back and look at these sites again, but the exercise is different because clearly this time it's got to look at those sites as well as other sites that might be available in the rest of the district. So that's the background to why we've been writing to principally those who deal with sort of clients or agents in the sort of Somerset East area. I think it's clear to say this is not the full Somerset call for sites. There will be a Somerset-wide call for sites. We are looking at updating the information we already hold. We're looking at, and also we're specifically looking at sites which can be delivered by the end of the Mendip plan period. So that's 2029. So that's a bit not quite the same as a normal call for sites. And the reassessment is essentially going to be against the adopted plan strategy. So we're not necessarily going to allocate more than 500 dwellings or 505, and it needs to follow the same processes that we did. The other key fact for us is that we need to do this work within the next 11 months, actually submitting plan proposals to the planning inspectorate by the 1st of July next year. That just highlights, I think the reason behind this rather more lengthy process is what the judge decided at the appeal is we could keep the rest of the local plan part 2 adopted. So this doesn't affect any of the sites which are allocated, doesn't affect the policies in local plan part 2, but we do have to go through a Reg 18 consultation and a formal consultation next year. To update our evidence on housing land, we've set up a call for sites page, which you'll find on the consultation engagement page. I'm just about to show you the links, and you can. It's the first time we've used the consultation software, including mapping, so you are able to actually add sites which are available for development. It's fair to say if those sites aren't going to come forward by 2029, they will be considered as part of the wider call for sites exercise. So you can add them now if you wish, but we're going to be specifically asking questions about bringing these sites forward early. We'd like we'd like you to use the mapping, because this is also a trial for the wider exercise we'll do for the Somerset plan as well. If you get really stuck, you can use our Planning Policy East email address. And I'll say this isn't the start of the Somerset plan, although it's in effect a mini trial in front of it. So just to get to the call for site survey, if you go the long way around, it's via Council Democracy Have Your Say consultation and engagement. I've got the website which takes you directly to the survey. If you go on to our Mendip adopted plans page, that will give you the background to the judicial review, what we're doing, what we're likely to include, what we're not likely to include. And I think because clearly this involves processes and evidence which was set out in the previous local plan part 2 examination, that most of the work on preparing that plan is still there on the Somerset website, but in the local plan part 2 page. So those were the main things I wanted to highlight of that exercise. And just to say that it closes on the 4th of September. I think we recognise it's not ideal to have this going over the summer, but it really reflects the timescales that we've been set by the judge. Happy to take any questions.
Yeah, are there any questions for Andre on that piece of work that's underway? I can't see any hands up. I know Graham is busily responding to questions about the placemaking and movement principles. And in the 3 minutes we've got left, if there are any questions on anything that's been discussed in this section, I'm happy to take them. Can't see any hands up. In which case, can I thank you all very much for bearing with us through the last hour and a half. And if you do have any other questions, if you want to get in touch, we'll be happy to come back to you. We will have a further update in 3 months' time. Thanks very much.